Good afternoon, and welcome back to Mr. Bennett's History Minutes. So, in the last episode on my series on travel in Europe, or random sketches and notes on European travel in 1856, we read the preface. We talked about the background of the book, a little bit about who Edwards was, who this Joseph Bailey might have been. Haven't done any more research on that yet. You'll actually probably notice that I'm wearing the same shirt and tie today, because today is actually the same day as when I filmed the preface. Anyhow, so I wanted to go ahead and get into chapter 1 and go ahead and make a little bit of headway into this series and have a few more episodes. You can still watch one a day or whatever as we go through this. So without further ado, we know that Edwards, remember, he's a preacher. He's not really a travel writer. And he even says, he preferred on reflection that the reader should have it just as I wrote it out on the spot. Much of it's written late. He admits to that. He says it's not historical, not scientific, not philosophical, nor does it pretend to anything in a literary way. So he's trying to be kind of humble here. It's kind of like, in the 18th century, people always end letters with your humble and obedient servant and all that kind of stuff. Being proud to be humble. Anyway, so we know that we have to take things with a grain of salt as we read this book. For one, Edwards is fairly wealthy. I don't know his exact worth. I'd have to look him up in the census tables for all that kind of stuff, and I've not done that. But you, dear listener and watcher and subscriber, can do that if you want to. The internet, like I said in the last video, is a very good tool for those kind of things. Anyway, he's a preacher. He's got a doctorate. He's able to go to Europe. His granddaddy had 23,000 acres in Virginia and Kentucky and all that. Probably slave owning. Actually, I'd be very surprised if this family was not a slave owning family. Did not hold people in bondage, since they had a lot of wealth, and they're Southern, and it was the mid 19th century. Plus, he's going to write some really Confederate stuff when he writes The Wounded Soldier during the middle of the Civil War, or in the midst of the Civil War. I don't know what year he wrote it. Anyhow, so we want to take into account that this guy, like most people who publish things in the 19th century, are going to be bigoted, are going to be more narrow-minded in a lot of ways. Even though he's a preacher, and we have to take into account that these are not modern people. They're not as enlightened as we are. However, that being said, we're going to see what he thought of people in Europe that he visited. I've not read the whole book. I've skimmed through parts of it. It's pretty interesting. And it's been about a year since I've looked through it, really. So without further ado, we're going to continue with chapter 1. And chapter 1, according to the contents, says from New York to Liverpool, departure from New York, night upon the ocean, reasons for my voyage, companions in travel, life upon the ocean, passengers, gambling, religious services on board, a gale, a big strong wind, sight of land, St. George's Channel, take a pilot, and arrival at Liverpool. So I'm going to turn this back around so we can see that. Let me see, I've still got an empty classroom here because it is the end of the school year. Let's see how that looks. Let's see, maybe something like that, so that y'all can see the book. There. All right. So chapter 1. I'm going to try and be as careful as I can with this book as we're doing this. Like I said, there were 31 chapters in this. It's quite a bit. All right, random sketches, chapter 1. See how that looks on the screen there. I'll bring it up like so. I think that's going to be my best bet. So we'll try and hold it there. Piece of paper fell out again. Chapter 1, from New York to Liverpool, departure from New York. I already read all that. February 20th, 1856. I took passage today at 3:00 p.m. on board the new and splendid ocean steamship Persia, bound from New York to Liverpool. We are just now outside Sandy Hook, and as the sun sinks behind the blue rim of the horizon, I commence my random sketches and notes of travel, which I propose keeping up daily, while impressions are strong and vivid upon my mind, during the whole period of my absence from the port which I am now leaving behind. The last boat, which brought passengers out to the Persia from the Cunard docks on the Jersey City side, drew off, thronged with hundreds of persons who had accompanied their friends on board the great steamer. lying midway between Jersey City and New York. Presently the machinery was in motion, and the majestic ship moved off slowly from her moorings, and, after describing a great circle upon the bosom of the ice-bound harbor, she stood out toward the sea. The scene was exciting when the signal guns were fired, and the crowd on the deck of the tender raised a shout that rang out on the cold, wintry air, like the rejoicings of a great multitude, and was responded to right merrily by the passengers on board the departing ship, while snowy handkerchiefs were waving over hundreds of heads as the voiceless but expensive farewells between friends who might never meet again. The sailing of an ocean steamer, though now almost a daily occurrence, cannot fail to excite the deepest interest and awaken the most intense solicitude in many minds. Each departing ship, in its outward bound voyage, bears persons away in pursuit of either health, pleasure, fame, or wealth, who leave dear ones behind, in whose bosoms a trembling and painful anxiety is felt on behalf of the adventurers. And as friends stand upon the boat that has borne the passengers from the shore to the ship in the stream, and with upturned faces and eager eyes pry among the dense throng that crowds the upper deck to catch a parting glance or token of recognition from a father, a brother, a son, or partner in business, a loud huzzah may ring out from the lips, but it is hard to check the rising tear or suppress the emotion that swells in the heart. Here's a little piece of poetry. I don't know who wrote it. I'll have to look it up. When forced to part with those we love, though sure to meet tomorrow, we yet a kind of anguish prove and feel a touch of sorrow. But our gallant and beautiful ship is hastening on toward the ocean. The lofty steeples and spires of New York are fading away in the distance. We pass the bar, discharge the pilot, and snap the last link that binds us to the receding shore, and find ourselves fairly afloat upon the wide domain of waters. Night is upon the ocean. As the shades of the evening gathered around us, a faint outline of the gradually sinking mainland was seen on the horizon, while the beacon lights along the shore gleamed and twinkled amid the darkness like the lights of hope upon the verge of life. The broad full moon, occasionally obscured by a passing cloud, rose over the waters of the dark blue sea, and spread out before us a path of light upon the restless, brilliant, and crested waves, luminous and bright as the gates of glory. But the winter is not yet over. The last 7 weeks have been intensely cold. Our rivers, canals, and harbors are locked up in ice, the like of which, for so long a time, has never been witnessed by the oldest inhabitant of our country. The Pacific, a fine steamer of the Collins line, now out 28 days from Liverpool, has not been heard from since she sailed. Serious apprehensions are entertained that she is lost. The Persia, which sailed from Liverpool but 3 days later than the Pacific, encountered large fields of ice, which partially disabled her, and we cannot tell what awaits us. But we cast aside gloomy forebodings and put our trust in God. 10 o'clock at night. The last hour has been spent upon the upper deck. The prospect is perfectly captivating. It is almost as light as day. Let me bring this up farther. There. Sorry about that. Let's see. The eye can range over a wide expanse of waters, agitated and broken by the wind, and sparkling in the moonbeams. Leaning over the prow of the ship, it was pleasant to listen to the splash and murmur of the waters as the wreaths of foam parted and rolled off to the right and left and dissolved again like the snowflake on the wave. Near me, an old sailor upon the forward watch narrated to my fellow voyagers some yarns about shipwrecks and sad disasters at sea, which he, of course, shared and acted a conspicuous and exciting part. He was once wrecked on the coast of Africa and supported himself for the space of 36 hours in the sea, and on a small spar of the vessel, swimming first with one hand and then the other until he got upon a sandbank, and ultimately was saved. In the midst of his narrative, the third bell of the watch was struck, and the old weather-beaten tar, in a sort of mechanical way, with a hard iron voice, cried out, "All's well," and it was caught up by the men on duty and carried from the forward watch. All's well," till it died away at the other end of the ship, which was nearly 400 feet from us. It is pleasant in the night watches to hear that sound flung upon the passing winds. All's well. I pause a moment before I lay down my pen tonight to inquire, why am I here? Why have I left my home, my pastoral charge, and thrown myself upon the ocean at a cold and stormy season of the year? I think I can say that nothing but hope of regaining my health, so as to enable me the more effectively to execute my whole mission as a preacher of the gospel, could have induced me, at this time, to leave my family and my church, to encounter the perils of a sea voyage and the privations of foreign travel. As much pleasure as I might anticipate in visiting the old world, and passing a few months among the monumental piles that tell of a past generation, and gazing upon all the magnificence of which the present spreads before the eye of the European traveler, I feel confident that the ruling motive in finally determining my mind in favor of taking the voyage and tour on which I have now entered, and to which I am fully committed, is the desire to render myself more useful as a pastor and preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ. May God go with me, and may the end prosper. Be I'm sorry. May God go with me, and may the end proposed be fully accomplished. Three highly esteemed young gentlemen are my companions in travel, forming a most agreeable and pleasant little party, namely Mr. Amandus N. Walker of Richmond, Virginia, Mr. John P. Branch of Petersburg, and Mr. Abram D. Warwick of Lynchburg. We propose passing directly through England and France on our way to Italy, where we design spending the months of March and April, and then return through Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, France, and Great Britain. We have allotted but 6 to 7 months to this tour, hoping to get back to the port of New York at the latest by the 1st of September next. February 23rd. Much has been said of the monotony of a sea voyage. This is 3 days later after leaving. And it must be admitted that there is but little variety in the calm, clear skies of unvarying blue, in a smooth, unruffled sea, unbroken by a billow, in a succession of days upon the waste of waters, unrelieved by a solitary sail, in steady breezes from the same point, requiring no change in the canvas of the ship, in the same uniform round of duties performed by the officers. Indeed, one can scarcely think of a more profound solitude than that which reigns around a merchant vessel, far out to sea, during a long continuance of fair and pleasant weather, but with but few passengers on board, and barely wind enough to fill out the sails, and keep the ship upon its course. The sailors hang listlessly over the bulwarks, with a vacant eye upon the sea, or lying upon a coil of ropes in the sunshine, dozing away the idle hours, the captain with his chart engaged in some aimless calculation, the subordinate officers carelessly pacing the deck without employment, and the imprisoned passengers sighing for the shore, and all as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. But it is far different on a splendid ocean steamer, crowded with passengers and propelled by a power that drives it forward, alike in calm and storm, and thus breaks the monotony that otherwise makes the sea voyage irksome and dull. The motion of the machinery, the action of the gallant ship bounding beneath the passengers, the boiling foam, crackling and flashing in the wake of the vessel, and the visible evidences that one is hastening onward to the desired port, all serve to give life and animation to the scene and relieve the tedium of life at sea. Since we left New York, we've enjoyed fine weather. We are now nearly 1,000 miles from Sandy Hook. The temperature is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and we have the promise of a quick and pleasant voyage. The sea has been so smooth that there has been but little perceptible motion in the ship, but few have been troubled with seasickness, but few have been troubled with seasickness. The Persia is a noble and elegant ship. The fare and accommodations are most excellent, and one can be almost as comfortable on shipboard as in the first-class hotel on shore. We have a large number of passengers, and among them are representatives of all nations and creeds. Nor is there any grade or type of moral character that may not be found in this diversified crowd of human beings. The voluble Frenchman, the more thoughtful German, the stiff and formal Englishman, the sober-sided Scotchman, the independent Swiss, the indolent Spaniard, the pantomimic Italian, and all sorts of Americans, from the most polished and elegant gentleman to the rudest boor. Boor, in this sense, comes from the Dutch word boer, which means a farmer, kind of like the German word Bauer, are in this heterogeneous mass.
And the confusion of Babel scarcely split the earth into more languages than strike the ear in the dining saloon. When a good dinner has put everyone in a fine humor and the sparkling champagne has given exhilaration to the spirits. Remember, this is long before preachers were usually preaching temperance, and volubility to the tongues of the talkative crowd. The mania for gambling is developing itself among the passengers. The intervals between the meals are devoted to cards, chess, backgammon, and other games, not merely for recreation and amusement, but for gambling purposes, and large amounts of money are constantly changing hands between the parties engaged. Nor is this gambling confined to games of chance or games that tax the intellect, but men are found who are ready to bet on anything. Parties are betting on the number of days that the Persia will occupy in her present voyage, betting on the hour of the day she will get into port, betting on the number of the boat from which the ship will take her pilot, betting that the Persia will get to Liverpool before the Quaker City, which sailed 4 days before the Persia, betting that the Pacific is not lost, and on a hundred other things of similar nature. For some reason, the captain of the Persia refuses to post the daily run of the ship. This is a source of great dissatisfaction to many on board. It is regarded as a foolish and unreasonable innovation upon established usage. It is said, however, that Captain Judkins refuses to do this because of the gambling to which it leads. Is that the right page? Yep, to which it leads. The prevailing, if not universal, custom on the regular ocean steamers is to post the run of the ship every day at noon, as soon as the observations are made. As soon as this is done, a large number of persons are found who are ready to bet that she will not run as far, or that she will run farther, the next 24 hours. And in this way, a large amount of money is won and lost during the voyage. Our good captain, however, I'm inclined to think, declines to post the run of the ship, more from a careful regard for the safety of the passengers and to avoid the suspicion that the officers are implicated in this betting, than from any conscientious scruples on the subject. This abuse of the posting of the run of the ship has, in this case, cut off the whole of the passengers from the gratification of knowing anything about their distance from the port left behind, or the port of destination ahead, only as it may be ascertained from subordinate officers of the ship, who, in this regard, manifest a more polite attention to the wishes of the passengers than the cold, curt, and snappish captain, who replies to a reasonable inquiry with a grunt, and turns away without giving any satisfaction. It is a pleasure to the passengers to know how they are progressing on their voyage, and it is absurd and unreasonable to deny them this gratification because gamblers will bet on the run of the ship when this is daily communicated to them. Outside of the ship there is but little to vary the tiresome monotony. The same scenes are constantly before the eye. On occasion, an occasional sail seen in the distance and gliding like a spectre upon the edge of the horizon, or a seagull on tireless wing, or a flock of Mother Carey's chickens in the wake of the vessel, is about all that meets the view as it ranges over the sea, except the sky and water. And yet, with agreeable compassions, a passenger may pass his time almost as pleasantly in the absence of seasickness as upon the land, and no one need be at a loss for society. All the passengers occupy a common platform, and without the formalities of an introduction one may converse with whom he chooses, without any violation of what by common consent is regarded as etiquette among travelers. Some very agreeable and delightful acquaintances may be formed in a voyage across the Atlantic by availing oneself of the advantages which this freedom of intercourse flows. For there is scarcely any assemblage composed of the same number of persons in which the same amount of general intelligence may be found as in the company on an ocean steamer. There is not a subject in the whole range of literature, politics, science, commerce, or agriculture in relation to which someone may not be met with who possesses the highest degree of information, and everyone, with exceedingly rare exceptions, seems willing to converse and impart information to others. I think I'm going to end there today. I'll just read like 2 days at a time. So that was February 20th, February 24th, 1856, on board the Persia, with Dr. Edwards, Reverend Dr. Edwards, being on his way to Europe. Stay tuned for further episodes of readings from this book. I may end up skipping ahead some. I probably won't. But I'll probably only read a day or two at a time. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching Mr. Bennett's History Minutes, and have a good one.